I'm Megan Hofer with Purdue Extension in Vanderburgh County, and today I'm going to share with you a fun science experiment using candy pumpkins. We are going to use 5 different liquids to see if we can get candy pumpkins to dissolve and decide which one dissolves it the most quickly. So today we're going to be using milk, vinegar, water, oil, and soda as our liquids. So before we get started with our experiment, let's make a prediction. A prediction is our guess on what we think will happen, and then we get to test that prediction. So right now, take a moment to jot down what you think will happen. Which liquid do you think will cause the pumpkin to dissolve the most quickly? Write that down as your prediction, and then we'll test it out. So for today's experiment, the supplies you will need will be candy pumpkins, 5 cups that are clear that you can see through, labels for each of the 5 liquids we're going to be using, vegetable oil, soda, water, vinegar, and milk. Those are the 5 liquids we'll be using. You'll also need a measuring cup to measure out each liquid. To get started, let's measure out a half a cup of each liquid and pour it into our clear cups. So we'll start with milk. Measure out half a cup of milk and then pour it into our cup that's labeled milk. You'll repeat this with each of the liquids until we have them all filled up. Now that we have all of our liquids measured out, we get to add the fun part, the candy pumpkins. So take 5 candy pumpkins and place 1 in each of the cups. In the lesson plan that's linked below this video, there's an observation log, so be sure to get that out. Now we're going to make observations on what we see. So take a minute to look at each cup and write down observations that you see of each candy pumpkin. Now set the timer for 5 minutes. We'll come back and look at our experiment in 5 minutes and make our next set of observations. Now that it's been 5 minutes, take a look at each of the pumpkins in the liquids and jot down your observations on your observation sheet. Be sure to take a look at the color, not only the color of the pumpkin, but also the color of the liquid. Do you see any changes related to color? What about texture? Do you see any changes in the texture of the pumpkin, or the size or the shape? Jot down any notes you may have. It's also a good idea to have a plastic spoon around so that you can take a look at each pumpkin. Feel free to fish it out of the liquid and get a closer look. This is especially helpful in the milk because that's hard to see since it's not a clear liquid. So jot down your observations, and we'll continue jotting down our observations every 5 minutes until we've reached 30 minutes. Now that 30 minutes has gone by, write down your final observations. What do you see in each of the 5 cups? Which liquid dissolved the pumpkin the most quickly? Was your prediction correct? So, before we go any further, I want to tell you I'm going to share the science now. So if you haven't conducted this experiment yet, I'm going to give results. So pause it and conduct the experiment, and then come back for the science. In our case, we see that water caused the pumpkin to dissolve the most quickly. We see some changes in the vinegar and soda cups, and we see almost no changes to the pumpkin in the oil and milk. Why is this happening, you might wonder? Candy pumpkins are made up of sugar and coloring. The molecules in the sugar and coloring have both positive and negative charges. You'll also see that water molecules have positive and negative charges, so they can attract and break down the sugar. Water has powerful magnetic properties that can break down these sugar bonds. You'll also see that the vinegar and the soda is starting to cause the candy pumpkins to dissolve, but not as quickly. That's because they don't have as many positive and negative charges on their molecules. And finally, you'll see that the milk and oil have caused almost no changes to the candy pumpkin. The oil has no positive or negative charges on the molecules, so it is not attracted to the sugar molecules and is not causing it to dissolve. If you like this experiment, you can take it a step further and try out different options. You could repeat the experiment with different liquids to see how those would impact the dissolution of the candy. Perhaps you could try corn syrup, or soapy water, or even Kool-Aid. You could try any different types of liquids. Another factor you could change would be the candy. What if you tried Snickers, or Reese's, or M&M's? How would those be impacted by the liquids? Would we still see the same dissolution happening with the water? Test it out and see. What would happen if you tried this experiment with cold water, hot water, and warm water? Would that have an impact on the dissolution of the candy? There's only one way to find out. Give it a shot. I hope you enjoyed today's experiment. For more science videos, be sure to check back on our YouTube channel frequently for experiments you can do on your own or with your classroom.